talk about documentation, communication, and community, and actually how to combine all these three together. So, you know, I spent a lot of years in software development. I started working in big companies, but then I changed my priorities to open source and thus started to work for and with laboratories in research facilities in Europe. But, you know, either working for the companies or for laboratories, I actually had to write documentation, and as for me, it was real pain. So, I mean, I am really hard with finding the right word to put, and whether it should be a storytelling or should I only proceed with an API documentation and what to put. And yeah, so this is why I'm here to share my knowledge and my experience and talk about why actually we need to document. I have two serious issues to say. The first one is actually people do not use documentation, and this is not only about software development, you know, so think about buying, for example, a new blender, whether you, I mean, read the manual first, or you just really, actually you are the one to, oh, really, this is great to know, because I always first skip that, and in case something goes wrong, I mean, this is the reason I actually opened it and start to read. And the second one is more kind of software specific. It gets out of date really, really quickly. So why actually we then talk about that? Well, the thing is that documentation is not only about documentation. So documentation is an important part of a community builder, and community is actually what makes our project be successful. And here is an example of a doc camp I attended. It's a real example of team building. So our organizers were clever enough to find a house somewhere high in the mountains, and the timing was perfect. So it was late autumn, the weather was horrible, so it was raining and snowing, and actually we had nothing to do but to communicate and to write documentation. So, and I have taken the second picture, so you see, but all in all, we had really great time. I met people for the first time because mostly we all work remote, and it was real fun. It was really a successful thing. Another thing to mention, that documentation still remains the best communication tool for groups, and it is an easy access to the information rather than asking. So why to do what someone else has already done, doing research, right? And another thing to mention, that documentation may be a single source of truth within a group or a company, and this is true when we talk about remote work. But even if you work alone and do it everything on your own, it is difficult to remember what you did a few weeks ago or months ago. So you find out reading and investigating your own code instead of coding itself. So without this, it is difficult to be sustainable and consistent. Well, I call this an obvious trap. Probably you may find another naming for that, but I think like this. So it is obvious for me, so it is obvious for everyone. But documentation actually helps to avoid this trap by looking from different perspectives. So we do not usually use the same vocabulary to talk about the project, and this may lead to confusion and missed expectations. people do not always know or use the same words we do, so we have to find this common ground to achieve our goals, right? Another fact, we may actually succeed with documentation and build a product or a project, especially when we talk about some kind of a library, for example. And this is a big project, so it's an ecosystem. It's an example of such documentation. I think a lot of people work on it, so it is well organized, it's colorful, a lot of topics are covered there. But here is another example. It's a really small project, but it's maintained only by one person, but still it is quite popular. So look at the first article. So it's difficult to read that because cannot see that. But I mean, that is about what is new in Java 19. And you may see that it was viewed by about like 7,000 people. So it is a real thing to do. So, okay, probably we say, okay, I think I need documentation. What can be easy just to see it and write down. But as for me, as soon as I open my laptop and start to write, I mean, I'm a little bit confused. So now I would like to switch to another, to the next part, talking about types of documentation. So nowadays, software development is a real complex system with its business logic, specifications, user flow, and in what direction to think, right? Here is an example of different perspectives of types of documentation. Actually, there are a lot of other. It's just like what I think is okay to show. So the first one, the high level and a low level of view, this is from the perspective of the usage and the code. So the more it is connected with the coding, the more low level it is. Process and product. So process is about how, so about strategy, about technology, about roadmaps, metrics, and something like that. And product is about what, so what to put on the website, what about security, what components are to be used, and manual or automatic. Well, this is in terms of how documentation was done. So whether it was a person who sat down and do that, but I mean, yeah, you know. So of course I have to mention also Write the Doc. Probably you have heard about that. So it's a global community of people, as they say, who care about documentation. So they suggest these 4 kinds of documentation. So if you love their solution, you may find some information on their website. Yeah, and I must say that all links and information that is in presentation, well, they are put on a dedicated slide, so no worries, there will be this link to the Write the Docs. Well, as for me, it is easier to separate documentation like this, thinking about manual, human, or high-level overview. So when we think about who will read, so these are whether we are talking with developers or managers or probably users of our product, about and think about way of their thinking, about their motivations and things like that. And another perspective is automatic or low-level overview. This is about more API documentation, something connected with code or bugs or issues. So all in all, start to think about these groups, like focus groups, like developers and administrators. So you see it on this slide, the level of their expertise, the level of details, and something answering the questions how to, what if, and why. So who is going to read and why they actually have to read it. So structure information, define metrics, and think about in what places to put that. So easy to say, right, but what to do? Well, from my perspectives, well, we have to provide transparency and transfer knowledge, making a process. I suggest you the following. So organize your routine, make it clear, be flexible, but when I say flexible, I do not say chaotic or disorganized. You know, many projects still survive just because they're well organized, and of course do version control. So set up your goals, your roles, make tasks to processes, and create detailed steps to perform these processes. And talking about the process, so it's more or less the same as in software development. So it's analysis, requirements capture, design, implementation, and maintenance. So just make documentation be one of your process. And here I would like to show you two videos, two examples of how documentation process can be created. So I worked on both projects. So the first one is a smaller one, and the second one is a really huge. A lot of people work on that. And I also will use some tools. Actually, this is the next part of my presentation, but here I would just want to show how to use that, and probably that might be useful to you as well. So these are examples how that show that how you can integrate your documentation into your CI/CD pipeline. So now I have to switch to the first video. So I didn't know about how good internet is here. So just a second. So it's difficult because, yeah, so, okay, probably I have to do it like this. So you see it's just GitHub, and here I just want to show you, you know, this Waka screen. This is why you see this video right now. So it's very simple and easy. Now I just want you to see how I make clicks. It's just an example. You may adjust it as if you wish. So let's proceed with the main topics, and probably you may see that it is docs folder here. And let's see how it was created. So it's a JavaScript file, and probably you may notice there are some odd things there, some tags, and when we'd use that, we may create something beautiful like this. So it was done automatically, and you see that the method in the code kind of the same as in the documentation. It is possible to switch between different methods as well. So let's look of how to do that. So you put some special symbols and tags in your code, and it is possible to do because I use this JS doc specification, actually because it's because of this because of the code, and you see it's quite simple. So you just put tags into your code, write what you want to, some commands and information. Then we have to build that, and for that use documentation.js, because obviously it's JavaScript and we have to use that. So it's very simple, you just install that, and here you see this docs, meaning this docs folder. And you may have noticed that there was a link. That link was created, thankfully, for GitHub Actions. So you go to Pages, select the folder you want to, and here you see this link, and well, you can share it with everyone you want to. And I just want to show you these actions. So you see, well, everything was done for me. So it's kind of a simple thing, so you do not have to think of how to share my knowledge and how to spread that. But I mean, there is a simpler way to do, and you see here is a YAML file. So you probably all know this, but just in case, I have decided to show this as well. So here is the script, and you may put this JS documentation.js and here, and everything will be done automatically as soon as you press commit button. So, I mean, you even do not have to remember to build a file first, so everything will be done, I mean, for you, and I just show you, like, yeah, some probably obvious things, but yeah, so it's really simple. Yeah, so this is, in this case, I just want to show you that it is really simple, and I start typing love scale, and you have definitely put some commands. It's just an example, so I didn't do that. So I just press commit button. Yeah, so, and here I just want to show you how quick it is. So I did not speed up this video, so it's a real one. Okay, I'll just grab some water. Just talking for. So you do not have to look at that, right? So, I mean, I'm just showing you, so this is kind of a really quick thing, so you do not have like to wait for 15 minutes or an hour or something, so it's kind of simultaneous. Yeah, and with GitHub Actions, it's a really amazing thing they've done, because you can see what's happening, and I mean, not to be frustrated without knowing what they do. Yeah, so so here is the link, so it's actually the same one, and I just want to update the documentation you have seen, and yeah, so I mean, nothing special. You even do not need to press Control F5. F5 is enough, and yeah. So, and this was the first example of how to create. To create the process, and here's another video. So this is a really, really big project. So it's an open source project, and this is an example of their documentation. So you may see the list of authors working on that, and it's really huge teams working. So I was part of the team doing organizing the documentation, because the project is really a long-lasting one. It's kind of, I don't know, it's like 20 or 30 years, so can you imagine how much information they have? So it's really huge. And to build this, we used read the docs. Probably you have heard about that. So really a powerful thing. And I would like to show you that. So, so it's a platform where you can actually deploy your documentation. So it's really powerful. It's free, and so it's on open source. So you may use different formats. So like PDF, and I mean whatever you want to. So you do not need to share the link, so it's kind of a book, maybe kind of a book. You can always update that, so it's really great, and they have amazing documentation. It's very simple. You may just follow the rules and everything will be fine. So actually, this is the way we created Tango documentation. So for example, you see they advise to use restructured and Sphinx for that, and this is the way we actually did that. And yeah, so really a powerful tool. And just to show you an example of how it was done with us. So we proceed with the GitLab at this time, and we use even a special repository for that. So, I mean, this is an example of a really huge documentation, and we had actually to create that repository. And I don't know whether you know restructured or not, so it's kind of markdown, but it's a little bit more complicated, but still it's okay. So you may use references. So you see it's not that difficult to use. And it's much easier than LaTeX, if you heard about that. Yeah, so it's much easier. So yeah. So this is an example that actually documentation is not that difficult, and there are a lot of tools. So you do not have at the moment just to see it and think and to be a writer. So there are a lot of things nowadays to help us with that. Okay, I'll try to find my mouse. Is it there? Okay. Okay. Just a second. I cannot find my mouse because okay, it's okay. Yeah. So at this point, I would like to switch to another part and talk about tools to simplify the process. So I have already showed some. And actually, the biggest issue that teams sometimes just do not how to do that, you know. So we have information. We want to share this information, but we do not know how to do that. I suggest to think about credibility, of course, and use some simple things like coding conventions, testing along with development, version control, and tools of language and framework. So let's start with the first one, coding conventions, and actually it's the easiest one. So just make code make sense, and hide documentation in class names, files, and so you know what I'm talking about. I have mentioned only several of them, like variable naming, class function naming. Try to avoid deep nesting. no to copy pasting if it is possible, no too long methods and something like that. So it's up to you to decide, but still it is good to fix it somewhere. Just write this and share that with your colleagues. It would be might be very easy to proceed and communicate with each other. So think about someone who is new to the code. So this person should go through the code at a glance and understand what is happening without reading every single line. Testing along with engineering. So you definitely know about test-driven development, right? So it is when you write tests before the coding itself. So actually, this is really powerful tool. So tests, they are not only about how the code should behave, but also about how to use APIs. And these are also great examples of certain functions and edge cases. And yeah, I put here version control, and I mean something like GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket, and this is the most misused way of documentation, but it is really, really powerful though. And I still have to stress that because, and I have decided to put this in this presentation because I've met a team last year, and guess what? They still use folders as a backup version. So should I mention that there is just like only one person who kind of remember what's happening there? So I mean, please, I mean, it is not very difficult to learn how to use version control. So it's really, really easy. And it helps to track the logic of code changes and answering the question of why it was done, but not what. Because, I mean, it's very easy. You just simply compare the code and you easily can understand what was done. But, I mean, make sure to do commands and write and explain why you have done that, but not what you've done. And readability. When we start to think about readability, you probably start to think about something like bullet points, marking text as bold, but there are other ways to do that. For example, mind maps, graphs, concept maps, code conventions, infographics, videos, and okay, text, of course. And each image on this slide makes sense. So, and when I say, I mean, probably not the graphs one, but when I say meaningful, so for example, the image on mind map is describing how to create mind maps. So, I mean, I truly understand this is difficult to see something at this slide, but as I've said, there will be a dedicated slide with all links. So you may download my presentation and go through these, and yeah, probably that might help you as well. And this is an example of a diagram, but it is an auto-generated diagram. And as you see, it is quite easy to read, right? And this is a really nice tool to check your code structure. So if your diagram is really chaotic and difficult to read, think about the structure of your code. This is an example of a mind map, so this might not be about documentation at all. This is another example of how you can use it. So I have already showed you this Tango project, and it has a lot of frameworks, libraries, and I suggested to use mind map for easier navigation. So you see now which libraries they have, which core libraries they have, tools, I don't know. So it's easy to navigate, so it's all clickable on the website, and why not to use that? Text versus image. So imagine you try to learn German, and you start to learn this Wasserhahn, which I hope translated correctly in English, is faucet, and compare that with something like this. So now you know 3 words instead of 1, right? So it's Wasser, it's Han, and if you put it all together, you get this Wasserhahn. So actually, before doing this presentation, I even did not think that actually the Wasserhahn actually looks like chicken, right? But here I would like also to stress this, that images help you not to be language specific. So when you use the text, you need to at least know English, right? But I mean, the image helps you to avoid this. And again, you do not have to have several versions. We are all global now, right? So, and yeah, we have teams from all over the world. So the images actually help us to avoid this kind of misunderstanding. And yeah, talking about images, be careful. So this is an example of a poster that contains 440 characters, items, and so forth. So probably in this case, it is okay because it's poster, but when we talk about documentation, be a little bit more precise and not try to put everything in one. Yeah, I have already talked about graphs, mind maps, roadmaps, and yeah, there are lots of other stuff depending on your budget or whether you want to proceed with something free and open source. They are good for every types of documentation, whether it's business or for developers. I have also mentioned some of tools of language and frameworks. Be sure to check yours. Of course, it's not the entire list. There are a lot of other things. Just Google that. And I would like also to mention that probably you all know Jira and Confluence. They have great templates and interaction with software, but I mean these are not free, right? But you may use their templates to get some ideas of what structure of documentation you may want to have. And yeah, so we are in the 21st century. We're in TikTok, Instagram, YouTube era. Do not be ancient, right, and use videos as well. It's very simple. I have already showed how I have done that. I mean, in terms of, well, this Voca screen, it's really simple to install and to use. Why not? Of course, you may say that probably with the new project, it's really okay, right? So I just put it as another process, but what if I have an existing one? But I would like to say that if you make it a routine for you and your employees, make it one of your processes for developers, create this process into your existing continuous delivery pipeline and allocate enough resources. Or, I mean, even writing a tag in the code takes some time, right? So be realistic. So Of course, documentation requires time, but we may reduce that using special tools for that. And actually it is possible, right? It is possible to make the process understandable and a standard, make it easy, make it part or probably just small part of your daily routine. So, you know, everyone wants to be heard and being understood. And, but often what people say and what they mean may be two different things. Therefore, make it possible for others to express their ideas and views and being understood. And I would like to end my presentation with a citation of James Clear. So he's a writer and speaker focused on habits and decision making. So he said, you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. So in case of some unpredictable problems and unforeseen situations, everything tends to fall to the level of processes or systems. So make sure to create processes and make your systems be stable to survive in our world. Yeah, so at this point, I would like to end my presentation. And yeah, if you have any questions, you are very welcome. Yeah, and here is the slide with all references, just in case you may you may download that, from Scale. I'll put that online. Yeah, thank you. I forgot to drink. Difficult to talk like for 45 minutes. Oh, so how long I was. Oh, it's not, it's like 40. Yeah.
That was a nice presentation. Now, I find myself, I guess, just looking for input or kind of your opinion. I found myself in an interesting situation where over the last few months, I've been spearheading automations across our company. So it's not just our developers who need to write documentation. It's I'm writing an automation that takes requests from client relations, runs through the escalation teams, then over to our development teams and everything they're working on. And I'm trying to maintain the communication flow through that whole automation. So I'm writing individual documentation. I'm for each of my automations, I'm writing a process and an automation piece. I'm worried, however, I'm going to have to turn over all of this documentation to our documentations team. And they're just used to having things fly at them, and then they put them on Confluence and kind of, well, that's where it goes. I don't want the larger processes that I start to automate to become broken after a few months, because one automation changes, my documentation's broken into small pieces, and that's just how the documentation team treats it. Is it worth, would it be worth my time to try and work with that documentation team to get them familiar with a markdown language, or something that might be easier to manage large document sets? Am I making some sense here? I've got pieces that I'm trying to consolidate to a whole.
Yeah, so I mean, documentation is really a creative process, you know. So it is not like you may. So there is no one right decision, you know. So it's sometimes very difficult to select which way to go, and. I'm sorry, but this is kind of, you have to choose on your own of whether, because I mean, it is actually your further responsibilities for that. And I mean, just try some tools. Probably Google. Actually, a lot of tools just appearing and appearing, you know, and I mean, even my presentation, you know, with this list of tools, it's probably, I mean, it's not full, you know, and just try that. Yeah, I'm sorry, but I mean, it's really difficult. Yeah. So you have to probably think about your processes. I mean, just make a list of all your processes in your company, or your team, and think about them at first, and then think of how to combine these things, because documentation is actually about all that stuff happening, right? And from my perspective, I would just start with that, just thinking with an overview, like, just stand apart from what you're doing, look at the processes you have, just like list them all, and think of whether you want to proceed this way or another one. Yeah, so, but it's difficult to answer your question.
No, it's okay. Yeah,
I don't know whether it makes sense what I'm talking about,
no,
but...
it does make sense, and so, I've been looking at how I've generated all this and then thinking down the line how it would have to be maintained. Should any automation need to be changed? How do I change that documentation and make sure it kind of gets carried through to wherever that documentation is? And now I'm running further down this rabbit hole, looking at automations to track and manage all of my documentation. So as changes are made to my own pages, I get a notification. It just starts notifying responsible parties that there was a change in that documentation. But I guess I'm looking for a tool that I could keep all of my documentation into that would do that kind of change notification and change management without me having to build in automations to support it, to
okay. Yeah, but I'm sorry, but so I'm a software developer, so this is my pain, right? That so probably I may Google as well, and if you leave your command, just like your information, I may just write more, be more specific about your problem, because at the moment it's difficult, just to answer the question.
Hi, Olga. Thanks a lot for your presentation. I think my question is kind of going to be like his. There might not be an answer, but I want to share this is close to home because I don't know how to do this right. Okay, so I'm a cybersecurity engineer, so what we do is we run Agile, right? So we have user stories, right? So mine's not talking about documentation for code. It's more like, what is the status of the user story? So let me give you an example. Is our Scrum team members coming out, so we had new people joining. So a user story could be anything, right? I guess my first question, do you usually, because we have I put a conference page, which is a Atlassian tools. We use Jira and Conference for every single user story. So my question is, it's not a code, it's really talking about the status of the user story. Do you use a template? Because I have limited time to complete my user story, but I want to get to the point people can understand what I'm talking about, because I saw on one of your slides, sometimes what I say may not come out to be what really people think. And my struggles is like, do I even use tables? I saw the mind map, which is pretty nice. And so let me throw out. I know I'm just rambling, right? What do I do this? So things is I always put a date on that because I need to say today's day I work on this. What are the action items, right? Out of the user story. Sometimes we have lots of users, and I explain it the way the next person come in, if he or she work related to this, that he or she can pick up where I left off, right? Because the user story might be part 1, there's part 2, part 3. I guess my question, first question, do you have a template every time you write a wiki page or something? Do you do that? I know it's slightly different. You're doing videos. I don't have time to do videos.
No, that was done on purpose because I had no idea. It's my first time on scale, and I didn't know how it actually, whether there is internet here or not. And this is the reason but that was easy, so it took me like 5 minutes to do that, so it's not, it's not my way of making presentations.
I think user story I can use for training, but in this case, I'm writing for user story, the status, or what are the action item, what are the, for knowledge transfer, I always think about somebody's going to pick up where I left off, who he or she or they understand what I'm talking about, right? So what, do you have any recommendation? I know I sound
Yes,
like going from left to
yeah,
right,
okay.
but I'm struggling in this area. I want, because I don't even remember what I did last year.
Yeah,
So I want something that
the
I
thing,
can go back and say, hey, I understood what I wrote that time. Thanks.
yeah, thank you for the question. So, you know, what is, okay, I'll try to find this, oh, how to do that. What? About this thing. So, you know, with the documentation, yeah, you know, with the documentation, you have to be very careful because otherwise you will read a book like with or several books on what you're doing. So the main problem with documentation is to be very precise and not to write a lot on that and to pick the gist of what you are doing. And this is a really problem. What I would recommend to you is just to understand of what is the goal of what you are doing. So what is behind all this storytelling? And think about the whole structure of the process. So why actually you are doing that? Why do you need this flow of stories? Whether you need your customers to be excited and wanting to know what's happening next. Oh, is that like, you know, it's like a movie. Oh, the next thing will be actually more interesting than the previous one. So what's the goal of what you are doing? As soon as you understand that, you will understand with what you want to proceed, on what to use. And probably this is, yeah, as I've said, the main problem of documentation. You have a lot of tools that might help you to create that, but I mean, first you have to understand the purpose of that. And it's about, okay, so it is also about, well, this thing, you know. So first you have to organize your routine, you know. So first you have to understand what is you about, and you have to make it clear. So you've spent some time, right, to explain me what you want to have, right? So it seems that it is difficult for you as well to understand what you're about, right? So, I mean, it took you a while, right? So, I mean, I understand it's difficult sometimes to explain what you want, but this is actually the reason. So if you just put your hand on and ask me just a single question, that's probably the reason we are heading to. If you have to spend somewhere like 10 minutes to explain what you want, so you first have to sit and relax and think about this question first on your own, you know. And yeah, so of course this is just my experience. So I mean, I do not pretend to be a professional in that. But I mean, first, please think about the routine and organize that. Sometimes we are really chaotic about what we are doing. So we just start doing coding, then we find out a bug, right? So there's a bug, so we have to fix that. Something happened. Someone, I know, your colleague is ill, and you have to replace that, and it's a complete mess in our head. So as soon as you organize your routine and make it clear, right? So you kind of be stable with what you have, and then you understand of what you want to do right? Because as I've said, there are a lot of tools that helps to document nowadays. So, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Olga. Hi. First of all, thank you for sharing your system. This opened up a lot of ideas. You know, one of your first slides really spoke to me, and that was that documentation is not always about the documentation. It's about setting the one truth for the team. Could you share a bit how maybe you've got your team to buy into that mindset as well and think about this is for sharing with each other rather than maybe external sources? Does that make sense?
So how do we stay on the same page? Is that the question?
Well, you had a slide where you and your team went up to a mountain retreat
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something
yeah.
and put it together, and obviously that was probably fantastic for the team understanding everything across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any kind of, as you were probably I'm assuming the leader of that, did you have to get the team to buy into the mentality of we're creating the one truth for this product?
Okay, I see. So, I mean, yeah, thank you for the question. No, I mean, no, I was not the leader, so I was just a part of that. But it is a difficult question. So, I mean, communication is really nice for that. So, when you start to communicate with others, share your ideas, and write that down, and then discuss with others what way you would like to proceed, and kind of vote for this idea or that idea. So it's about like building a community around something. So it's really difficult, right? But I mean, sharing your ideas, your thoughts, and listening to others as well. That might be difficult, but might greatly help with that. When I presented this team building thing, it was not a very easy thing as well, because, you know, I wanted to go this way and restructure documentation that way, and another person did not agree with me, right? So what to do? And this is the way of communication, but it was a really huge project. Being team leader, probably it's easier, right? You just say, I'm the leader, right? So I think that we have these and these rules in our team. So please, I mean, if you want to be understood as well, so we really appreciate what you are doing and the way you are thinking, but it is difficult for us to understand what you are talking about if you do not follow the rules. And so it's, you know, this do version control is more or less about that. So, I mean, and being flexible as well. So, but I mean, still put that into your routine. So as soon as you add something and think about something, put it right away. Otherwise, you'll just either forget that or mess that, or you need to be very straightforward with that. Yeah.
Hi.
Oh, hi.
I guess I was curious, like, so writing is hard, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I guess writing is easy. Writing clearly and in a way you can understand is hard. So, like, have you used, like, or have any experience with using the new AI tools to write better in some way?
Oh, yeah, I haven't mentioned that.
So it's
This is really good. I mean, as well, I'll tell you. I mean, as for me, it is extremely difficult to write. So I'm a really math person, you know. So I mean, I started really, math things where every word matters. And when I started to write documentation, it was a complete, I was in panic, you know, so, I mean, what is the right word to put on? So I had no problem with putting like 3 words and that's it, you know, so, and this is actually this obvious trap thing. Well, And actually, I have graduated from artificial intelligence faculty, so I'm very happy to have something like thing you had. So actually, it's a good helper. So it's really, really a great thing. So I do not think, I mean, that it is bad because someone will lose a job or something like that. So it's a progress. We cannot stop that. And why not to use the tools we have right now? But you have still to read what they suggest us to put on, right? So, and probably reorganize that. But I mean, I'm not the person who put a lot of information. I do love mind maps, diagrams, or something like that, because you do not waste time on reading. So, and I mean, just a single page with all information on that. Try to be like that.
Yeah, so what I find is it's good at, like, if you throw something at it and tell it, write this clearly or write it better, it'll do a great job. But if you like tell it, like, explain to me how this function works, then a lot of times it'll be confidently incorrect.
Well, we still have to wait a little bit for that, right?
So
to be correct.
Yeah.
I mean, of course.
It can be really, really, really bad.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, it's a helper. So it's not like the tool you have to. It's not like, you know, it's not like a physicist, like or math, right? So it's up to you to decide whether to use that or not, right? And it's a really great tool. As for me, to find information there. Have you tried writing code there and asking that to write the code? No?
I've not.
Okay.
Yeah, I've not tried that.
Okay, try that. This is real fun as well.
Yeah.
Okay, we have about 3 minutes left in the session. Any more questions? Yeah. Okay. If we could just one more time, a round of applause for our speaker, please.
Oh, thank you.